In the legendary film Rashomon, we discover that the truth is never simple. Each perspective reveals a different story. What you're about to hear is a true Rashomon tale from Hollywood's darkest corners. Which version do you believe? Ted Healy, a name many may not recognize, was the genius behind one of the most famous comedy troupes in history, the Three Stooges. Without Healy, there would be no Moe, no Larry, no Curly. But his contribution to Hollywood wasn't enough to save him from a tragic, suspicious death in 1937, one that remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Healy was no stranger to the tough life. He was known for his brash behavior and quick temper. But on that fateful night, something happened that sealed his fate forever. The official reports say Healy died of complications from nephritis, or kidney inflammation, but those close to the situation knew there was more to the story. Much more. Rumors began swirling almost immediately after his death, and multiple versions of what really happened started to emerge, each as plausible and as elusive as the next. Which version is true? That's for you to decide. Let's start with the first version. Some say that Ted Healy met his end at the hands of one of Hollywood's most powerful stars at the time, Wallace Beery. Beery wasn't just any actor. He was MGM's biggest box office draw in the 1930s, and he wasn't someone you'd want to cross. The story goes like this. Healy had been drinking heavily that night. After an altercation inside the nightclub, tensions spilled out onto the street. It's said that Beery, along with two other men, including the mob-connected Pat DeChico, beat Healy mercilessly outside the Trocadero nightclub. Witnesses claimed Healy was so badly beaten that he was left unconscious, but when questioned, Beery denied everything. Conveniently, he left Hollywood almost immediately after Healy's death, taking a long, unscheduled trip to Europe, which raised more than a few eyebrows. Some say it was a studio-sponsored getaway, a way to keep one of their biggest stars out of the spotlight and away from any potential investigations. But the truth? It never came out. Wallace Beery's name faded from the story just as quickly as the rumors had begun. Is this the real story? Could Wallace Beery have played a part in Ted Healy's death? Or was this just Hollywood gossip, designed to deflect attention from the real culprits? The second version is far less sinister, but no less tragic. Ted Healy, by all accounts, was a heavy drinker. On the night of his death, Healy was reportedly extremely intoxicated. Those who knew him well weren't surprised. Healy often had too much to drink and could be unpredictable when he did. According to this version of the story, Healy got into a heated argument inside the nightclub, but no physical fight ever broke out. Instead, Healy, stumbling and out of control, left the club and somehow fell, injuring himself. Some suggest that Healy's cause of death had more to do with his excessive drinking and poor health than any foul play. The coroner's report backed this up. Officially, Healy died of nephritis, with alcohol listed as a contributing factor. The severe beating that people whispered about? Just speculation, or so the official story goes. But does this explanation really hold water? Given Healy's history of heavy drinking and deteriorating health, it could be true. Or it could be a convenient way to brush a more violent truth under the rug. Now, let's dive into another version of the story. One that doesn't implicate Wallace Beery at all, but rather focuses on two other figures tied to that night. Mob-connected agent Pat DeChico and a young Albert Cubby Broccoli, who would later become famous as the producer behind the James Bond films. According to this version, Ted Healy, already drunk, started a brawl with DeChico and Broccoli. The altercation got physical, and fists flew. Healy was beaten severely, with most of the blows landing on his head. Some witnesses claim that this beating, at the hands of DeChico and Broccoli, was what led to Healy's death just hours later. Why would DeChico and Broccoli attack Healy? It's unclear, but given DeChico's mob ties and his reputation for violence, It's not hard to imagine that a drunken argument turned into something far more dangerous. But, just like the other versions of this tale, no one was ever charged, and the full truth never surfaced. Was this a case of Hollywood's elite protecting their own? Or was it simply an unfortunate accident blown out of proportion by the rumor mill? Then there's the most mysterious, and in some ways the most disturbing version of Healy's death. It suggests that Ted Healy's fatal injuries were indeed caused by a brutal beating, but that the full truth was suppressed by some of the most powerful people in Hollywood. Wallace Beery was MGM's golden goose, and DeCicco's mob connections made him untouchable. It's been suggested that MGM, with its vast resources and influence, orchestrated a cover-up to protect its biggest star, Wallace Beery, and to keep any mob-related scandal out of the headlines. After all, bad press was bad for business, and the studio had everything to lose if word got out that one of its biggest stars had been involved in such a violent incident. In this version of the story, we see Hollywood at its darkest, a place where the truth can be bought, and justice takes a back seat to money and power. So, what really happened on that fateful night in 1937? Was Ted Healy the victim of a brutal beating at the hands of Wallace Beery? Did a drunken brawl with mobster Pat DeCicco and Albert Broccoli end his life? Or was Healy's death simply the result of years of hard living and alcoholism? The truth? It remains as elusive as ever. Like the characters in Rashomon, we're left to sift through the stories, rumors, and half-truths, trying to find the version that makes the most sense. But in the end, the real story of Ted Healy's death may never be fully known. What we do know is this: Hollywood's golden age wasn't always so golden, and sometimes the brightest stars cast the darkest shadows.